This behind me is a gas holder or a gasometer standing less than a mile to the east of Manchester city centre. And it's been here since the late Victorian era, 131 years ago. And it's one of two in this immediate area. There's one just over there behind the camera. And together they are two huge reminders of a bygone era when city infrastructure in Britain had reached a point where large-scale energy supply needed to be part of the everyday landscape. And today, as you can see, it's already been demolished. And soon, probably before this video has been edited and gone out, it'll be gone completely. Now, of course, there are positives about this. First of all, these are derelict structures that aren't doing anything and they're taking up valuable space in a high-demand urban environment, desperately crying out for medium-density housing. And they're also incredibly dominant, and you might even say quite ugly. After all, it is just a big metal frame. But on the other hand, these structures, while quite common up and down the country, are becoming increasingly less so. Virtually none of them are actually left in use as they were intended, which makes the ones that remain more and more important from a heritage perspective. But on top of that, there's the human aspect. These huge structures are so big and have been here for so long that they've actually become part of the community, which makes their loss even harder to swallow for people living in this area. Gas holders like these were introduced at the end of the 19th century as the need for a regular and reliable gas supply became increasingly important within towns and cities up and down Britain. They're sometimes called gasometers, but of course they aren't meters at all, but simple containers designed to hold a reserve supply of gas to be used wherever was needed. In this way, they were very similar to water towers also seen up and down Britain at the time. But while water towers stored water up high so that the gravitational force could be used to keep stable pressure in the pipes, gas doesn't have this property, and so they were containers and nothing more. Gas holders were built where they were needed, close to houses and businesses, but they also needed enough ground space so that they were often constructed on the edge of the urban environment. There were 4 prominent gas storage sites around Manchester at the start of the 20th century. One in Collyhurst, one in Gathorne, and one over in Salford. All of them were built on sites tucked into the urban spread, but, with the exception of the one in Gathorne, all more or less on the edge of it. So this gives us a rough idea of how far urbanisation had spread when they were built. Originally, gas supply in Britain was coal gas or town gas, and as well as industry, was used in street lighting, which helped prevent muggings and assaults on the dark, dangerous streets after nightfall. The Gas Act of 1948 nationalised the UK gas industry. When it came into effect in May 1949, over 1,000 privately owned and municipal gas companies were merged into 12 area gas boards, geographically organised and collectively known as British Gas. In the 1960s, the UK started to import natural gas from Algeria for heavy industry, but by 1966, following discovery of natural gas in the North Sea, the decision was made to switch from town gas to natural gas universally. But that's enough about the history of gas. Let's go back to the gasometers. Now, like many, these ones in the Bradford area of Manchester were here for so long that they oversaw the complete transformation of the area over which they loomed. The closing of the coal pits, the demolition of the red brick terraces, the regeneration of a new modernist brutalist neighbourhood, the demolition of that, and the development of what you see today. The one being pulled down right now sits between the Ashton Canal, the railway line, and Bradford Road, on an area not far from where 2 old halls used to stand. The second, slightly larger one was built on the site of some old oil tanks, used as part of the gasworks over here, where the City of Manchester Stadium now sits. By the end of the 20th century, gas holders like these were needed less for storage and became more like pressure regulators for the piped system. The sight of them actually rising and filling with gas became rarer and rarer. The privatisation of British Gas and the realisation that gas was the cheapest and cleanest fossil fuel to use led to an uptake in the amount of energy supplied by gas in the 1990s onwards. Both of these things cannot last, however. Private energy companies continue to hold customers to ransom with inflated prices designed to keep profits high, even during a cost of living crisis, and fossil fuels are, well, finite. So the tearing down of these gas holders in Manchester are really just the first noticeable milestones on a road to getting rid of gas altogether. In 50 years' time, the idea that something like this even existed on this site will seem quaint and old-fashioned to new generations growing up in this neighbourhood. So while it's no longer necessary to have these structures around, like the water towers we've looked at in videos past, these things are now more than just practical necessities. And like any large structure, they become part of the background to the lives of the people around here, part of the canvas of this community. How many people within this community, within Miles Platting, but also miles beyond, have known these structures their entire lives? How many have taken them for granted as just part of the background to the other things that they've got going on around them? And these ones have actually been here so long, 131 years, that they've witnessed several generations come and go. Babies being born, people growing up and then passing away. So yes, they are just gas holders, pretty straightforward and still fairly common. But the very fact that we could get sentimental about them says a lot about our relationship with city design. And I think that they actually teach us a lot about life, in that everything has its time and we have to learn to say goodbye to the things we always thought would be there.